I want to, for those that don't know me, I'll introduce myself. I'm Don Watruba, the Executive Director for MASB. I want to first extend a thank you to all of MASB staff that helped put this webinar together today and the other webinars that we've done so far. This one's going to be different. Others that you've likely logged on for have been about MASB's legislative or legal team sharing information with you. Very clearly, if I'm comparing myself to them, they're the smart ones. Today, I want to facilitate a meeting with all of you to try and have you share. I will share what's going on in the association, but really to have you share with each other what you're doing in your districts that others can learn from and build upon, because districts are very different. We're in a time right now where I don't know that ideas between districts travel quite as well as they did before. And so I think it's important that we're giving an opportunity for people to share, because we're getting a lot of questions in the office about, have you heard how a district's dealing with this issue? Have you heard how this is? And we are hearing anecdotally, but thought this was a good opportunity to share that. We're going to keep this meeting to 1 hour in recognition of your time. It likely could be shorter than that, but at least that's what we're going to do. And so I'm going to go over some housekeeping issues with all of you so that we can make sure that this goes well for everybody. My first thing would be to make sure that you mute when you are not speaking. That really makes things go well. We don't hear barking dogs or yelling kids, which at these times we are familiar with, but it's always best in a meeting not to have that. After I get done speaking, we will move to a time where I start asking some questions. We will have MASB staff moderating to call on you, and then once we call on you, unmute yourself and we'll let you speak. Once you are asked to speak, please state your name and your school district, because often tied to your picture here on the screen, it doesn't even give your full name. And also, in order to hear each other, make sure that once you're called upon that somebody else isn't jumping in. If by chance somebody makes a comment that you think it's really relevant that you chime in on, I would throw that over in the chat section, and one of our moderators can say somebody wants to add on that question. And also then when you're done speaking, make sure that you indicate when you're finished and say, I'm done, I'm finished, or that's all, so we know where we stand in the scope of things. So those are some of the housekeeping issues to make sure that you deal with. We want to get into some test questions to make sure everything's functioning appropriately for you. This is a little bit different, where we're going to have all of you speaking in a more live format. So one of the ways that we're going to test today, if you want to speak, is to raise your hand. If you haven't used the raise your hand function before this, you will go down to the bottom of the screen where participants are at, and that is where, once you click on that, you'll be able to do that. So first question, you've had a virtual board meeting? And let's see if everybody can learn how to raise their hands. And I know some skipped March, and so April is the first month that some of those are happening. So
I don't know how to do that.
If you go down to the bottom of your page, there will be a spot that says participants. And if you click on it, you should be able to see options with, and you can see it on the screen right now, a hand that looks like somebody's waving at you. And I would even guide you more, but my screen looks a little bit differently. So when I click on the participants, and mine doesn't allow me to do that. So, all right, let's try another question. How many out there have made your own face mask? Because we know how difficult they are to come by, and where many people want to have our first responders to have them. I will say the most innovative face mask that I've seen, well, I don't know if it was innovative, the most interesting face mask that I've seen during this, I was getting takeout to support a local business and had a gentleman wearing a diaper as a face mask. And he said the elastic around the waist worked perfectly for creating the face mask. And I will say it didn't look as odd as it sounds like it would look. So anything that we do to keep safe.
I hope it was a fresh diaper.
Yeah. Another question, your district is providing meals to your students through delivery and or pickup during this pandemic. And the last one, because some of you may not find the raise your hand section, in the chat window is another way to let our moderators know you would like to ask a question. And so today our test question, so you can learn how to use chat, which is at the bottom of your screen, click on chat. It will open up a box. Let's figure out MSU or U of M today.
A lot of MSU.
I see a lot of U of M.
We will hold our judgments for everybody depending on what they put down and who you all support. I didn't go to either one. I won't be offended if you pick one or the other. Of course, you can see from behind me that the important football team that I care about is neither MSU or U of M. All right, we'll get started in this. I want to start this with a conversation really about the association. I think it's important in this time to have you all understand kind of what's happening at the association. And I want to first thank all of you, as I have on a few other videos that I've done, for your leadership at your local districts. And I'm sure for many of you, your leadership in your local communities beyond the school that you are participating in right now. I think we're in an unprecedented time. We've heard that from many people. I think school board members and schools have really stepped up during this time. In a way, I think you always have. But I think it's more visible now because you're infecting far more people than just your school children. And I think that you're getting far more recognition in the public sphere and in the media, particularly as it relates to the question that was asked in our initially, which is the meals piece of this, providing meals. I know many went beyond students and provided meals to families. And I just think that's been a wonderful piece, necessary, of course, but something that really has resonated within the communities. And I think that is tremendous. I see in chat, Kathy Stewart from Saginaw ISD just mentioned they've surpassed 500,000 meals distributed so far. And that, you know, just tremendous help to our communities in doing that. So, you know, thank you for whatever pieces that you're doing in your communities and with your school districts. I think it's showing well. I think it's going to build support for us as public education. And, you know, people talk about crisis bringing people together. And I think in the public ed sphere, it really has. And I will say, I think, you know, a thank you to the Michigan Department of Education for very quickly applying to the federal government for waivers on food. Now, I know they've ended up granted them across the country, but we were one of the first states that requested and had that approval to allow you all to move forward. So I appreciate the work that they've done. I think it feels really good to have kids back learning. I think almost most districts, if they're not up and running by this week, of course, will be by next. It feels good for me because I have 2 kids at home, and it's good to put them in a little more focus than that they've had over the last month. But I think for all of you that have dedicated your kind of lives as superintendents or board members to schools running and kids' educations, to at least be back in a place to know that kids are receiving an education again in a organized manner, and hats off to all of you for that. MASB, I want to thank all of the staff at MASB. I want to thank the MASB Board of Directors, many of who are on the call today, for putting us in the position to be able to very quickly move to a stay-at-home work environment to keep our staff safe, but also in thanking our staff to recognize that for most of you that have reached out to us during this period of time, I'm going to expect that you didn't see any change at all. When the phones ring, they get answered on our staff member's cell phone out of their living room, bedroom, wherever they happen to be, and we're continuing to provide service for districts as much as we can. You've seen a lot in the webinar standpoint. Jen and Brad, from a legislative and legal perspective, you can imagine they are incredibly busy. I think because of MASB's reputation over the years, we are involved in most, if not all, of the important conversations with legislative leadership and the governor's office about next steps, and they're listening to us as far as guidance when they're coming out with guidance on things as much as they can anyways, knowing that kind of health experts are who they're listening to the most. But to all of our staff, they're continuing to serve members. It's not easy for them. They're at home just like you are, many of them with kids at home, and we keep trying to do the work for our members. And as far as our board goes, we moved and had our first virtual meeting in March. It happened right around the time that things were starting to shut down, although the state hadn't shut down yet. And to make things more complicated, we're a 21-member board. So trying to manage that is a little different than a 7-member board. Like probably many of you that have had your first meetings, our first meeting in March had a little bit lighter agenda than we're accustomed to because we wanted to get a feel for the format and how it would work. We have our next meeting in May. We anticipate that will also be virtual, but we're going to go back to our normal. We're going to have an outside presenter present via Zoom to the board. We're going to have internal presenters presenting to the board and going back to a normal board meeting as we've learned the technology and keep moving forward. So, this is business as usual for MASB as much as it can be. And when I think about business as usual, we completed our first virtual superintendent search last week. We started that in person, but finished up through all of the interview process in a virtual way. It went quite well. I know some boards are not comfortable in that space. I will say that as I interact with other states, it is a commonplace occurrence right now, particularly for those districts that have superintendents retiring at the end of June, rather than trying to cram things in at the end. Those are ongoing, and we've reached out to other districts that we were working with to possibly move things forward in that. Our consultants that do labor relations, those have continued during this. They're doing them through Zoom meetings or another format like that. We just had one of our districts say, let's continue their strategic planning process via Zoom. And, we're starting to talk to districts about their workshops that they wanted to do. I think as all of us get more comfortable with the format through work, through family interaction, whatever it is, we're going back to kind of normal business. So I will tell all of you, if you had something pending or if you see something that you wanted to have done with MASB, continue to reach out to our staff, and we will schedule things virtually, and we will start scheduling into the summer, knowing that there's some difficulty there because we just don't know what our limitations are going to be. But understand that we're going to try to keep business as normal to help districts. I think at a time like this, you're focused on the important things right now, which is getting kids educated and making sure you're keeping people employed and your district is moving forward. But when you get to that space, to be able to turn back and look at yourself, know that we're available to help you in that. Also, like school districts, we are in the middle of our budget cycle for MASB, and we'll be working with our board of directors at their meeting in a few weeks to approve a budget that for us will be July 1, just like yours. We, like you, but probably not to the same extent, expect some budget difficulty in trying to make a budget work. Our revenue over the last month or so, or 6 weeks, has come down because we're not doing workshops and other things like we normally do. But a thank you to all of you that are on today. Likely if you're on today, you've been engaged with us over the last few years, and we have been able to, as an organization, create a fund balance for a rainy day. And I think we're in that place where we're going to be able to and need to use it. And so we don't expect to see a reduction of service. It's very important to both me and the board that whatever we've done for you in the past as far as services and programs, that we try to be able to continue to do the same thing. But recognizing that you will have difficulties in the midst of this budget process. The board hasn't approved this yet. We've just had some conversations, but we will expect that we will not be doing any dues increase to our members this year. We will not do any service cost increases to our members this year. We understand that you're going to have difficulties from a budget standpoint. We do not want to be contributing factors to that. So we will do our very best to keep our costs to you what they have been and not create any increases, recognizing your difficulty in that. We are also expecting to keep fully staffed at MASB. We financially believe we can do that. And for us, cutting staff means often reducing services to our members. And we are, do not feel that is something that we want to do. We want to keep a level of service to you that we have maintained, and we could do that for a while as we've prepared for this kind of event. So we're going to keep our services at a high level. We've already started getting questions about learning activities as we look at the upcoming year. We just this past weekend, and we have some coming up this weekend, some online CBA classes and some virtual CBA classes. We're asking for a lot of feedback on those. We will continue to improve, particularly the virtual ones. Our whole 100 level is, of course, online already. And we're going to have to continue to improve those, because really, as we do research on what re-entry into normalcy will look like, there are going to be limitations on gathering size for sure. It would be surprising if that's not the case. And we still need to provide you services, and you still need to learn how to do your jobs, particularly as we look at an election year where new board members will be coming in. Our annual conference is set up in Lansing this fall. No decisions have been made on that at this point, but I will tell you, in trying to be smart and think about it, we are looking at our options. We don't know whether gatherings of, in that case, north of 500 people something that will be allowed or not. So we're looking at different options related to that. I do not see a cancellation in our future because we have enough time. I would expect it's either going to be done in person, or we're going to move early and start talking about what a virtual / online experience would be for a conference. I don't want to wait until September 15th to have to make a decision that will lead to a poor event, no matter how we do that. So we're having those conversations. I'll be having more of those with the board in May. Just to understand that we're going to be prepared to provide a great fall annual conference to all of you and your counterparts, whether we're doing it in person or whether we're doing it in a different format. And as I said, our online CBAs will continue, virtual CBAs will expand, and just know that that's happening. We expect at this point, based on things we're hearing in Lansing, as long as COVID cases stay where they are and keep trending downward, the governor will be issuing new orders right around the 1st of May. We know that the legislature is going to put pressure for some reopening at that time. I think if the numbers are coming down, some of that likely will happen. At some point in May, we would expect some initial re-entry into the workplace for offices that could include MASB. And we are already talking about what that will look like, recognizing our staff, those that may have health concerns, those that may not, keeping them safe. We will likely do some phase in, like all employers, every other day, coming into the office, working from home the other day, and shifts sort of thing, just to make sure that we don't have a situation where we endanger any of our staff on reentry, but expect that is going to be the case. So I don't want to spend more time really talking about MASB. I think I've covered the main points. When I think of the state of the association, I think of you as the association and what's happening with you as the important thing. And so I'd like to get into kind of the open dialogue space amongst the membership here and talk about things. The way that I plan on doing this is I'm going to start, I'll throw a question out there. We're just going to do one at a time. We'll ask you, for those that have comments or would like to make a comment, to raise your hand and do that, or just not type your question in chat, but just type, I'd like to make a comment. Our moderator will call on you. We'll do 5 or 10 questions, and then we will move to the next question. I have 3 or 4 questions that I'd just like to hear from you on that I think will be relevant for all of you to hear from each other on. And we'll go in that process. I will tell you towards the end, I'm going to throw a poll question out there that you can answer through the system. And it's simply a question based on this interaction, whether you'd like other opportunities to share with other school board members, kind of your pain points and your successes in the future. So I will put that out there as we wrap up. And so with that, we'll get our moderators ready and all of you ready. My first question out to you is, if you have anything to share with the group, whether you consider it a best practice or whether you consider it something that has worked really successfully for you, interacting with your families, interacting with your kids, working with your staff, working with your board. Let's start off by sharing something that you have done in your districts that you just have found to be very successful, that you have gotten positive feedback from. So anybody that would like to talk on that subject, I'd love to see some hands go up, or I would like to comment type things in the chat function. And I'm only seeing like 20 of you, so hopefully there are others that are raising their hands saying, yep, we've got some cool things that are happening in our district. I can't believe there is none.
Deb Hatfield, could you please state your name and what district you're from?
Deb Hatfield, Berry ISD.
You have the floor.
Share with us, Deb.
Well, we have a really nice program going with our YMCA for our food distribution, which I think the collaboration effort really speaks loudly to what our community has been doing. But I like it that it's not just school. It's the YMCA, and we've actually had many community groups donate cash to the food program. So, not a huge item, but it's nice to see when these kind of activities are going on.
Thank you for sharing that. Really appreciate that. I believe we have another hand raised.
Pamela Campbell, could you also state your name and what district you're from?
Sure, I'm from Columbia District. I'm Pamela Campbell. And we've done a real good job in the food service area as well. We've partnered with the local food bank, and they serve extra food, give out food on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then our people do food on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We're providing breakfast and lunch where they're providing groceries. In addition, the second thing that I have to share is our lower elementary K2 did a great job. We provided 10 to 15 books for each of our little Golden Eagles, and they all received their books last Friday. and they're so excited about getting books. So that was a great opportunity to spread a little cheer to our little Eagles. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam.
Jihan, if you want to go next.
Hi everyone, Assalamu alaikum. Jihan Ayash. I am part of the Hamtramck Public School District. It's a city right in and next to Detroit. I am very proud of how our district was ahead of planning before, any of the executive orders came in. Before we were forced to do a lot of things, we were already planning on how to distribute meals and how to maintain resources in our district. Our district has very limited resources. We have a lot of students, in their special education department. We have foster students, we have undocumented students. And so we wanted to make sure that we were ready to go with whatever resources they need. So our central office staff has been phenomenal. Our building principals have been so cooperative. I'm just really proud of how much our community members and our district actually picked it up and was whatever you need, we got you. So we were translating at all hours of the day. Our laptop distribution stations have PPEs ready to go. I'm just proud of how far we've came in terms of preparing for this, because we're not as overwhelmed as some of the districts near us, because we already thought 2 to 3 steps ahead. And I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael Stricky, could you join us?
Good afternoon, everybody. With Wyandotte Public Schools, as soon as this thing started and we did not have schools in session, kids in schools, the staff was very proactive in staying in touch. Almost every building, especially in the lower L's, did something every day, a FaceTime. Most of them was a Facebook Live kind of thing where they read a story. They had some kind of interaction for at least 15, 20 minutes, something that kept the students engaged on a daily basis, whether it was the building principal or a teacher. They had something going on. While all that was happening, the superintendent was very proactive in that, what if this, what if that, what if this, what if that, and kind of walked through with her staff. Well, what if we never go back? And that was, of course, the worst case scenario. What if we don't go back this year? Well, we can this, we can that. And they kind of put some of those things in place, like Jihan was talking about, they tried to stay a few steps ahead. And so when they rolled out the plan, in fact, yesterday, everybody picked up packets at the school. We made sure everybody had a Chromebook, because we've got a 1-for-1 program. So almost everybody in the district has a Chromebook. Those that didn't, we made sure they had one by today, because today they went online, they went live, and it wasn't too bad. We haven't had many complaints yet that I've heard. So I'm going to say that was a success, and a lot of it was from being proactive. And how would we do this if this happened? So I'd like to say we landed with our feet on the ground. So I'm done.
Thank you, Michael.
Ann Hemming, would you like to share?
Sure. Hang on here. We just one small thing that we learned about last night. We had our first virtual meeting last night. It was awkward. We did not do any dry runs, but it went. So, but one really neat expression of community collaboration. We have roughly a quarter of our population does not have reliable internet access at home. And so our district, though, did distribute almost 600 Chromebooks and such to staff who didn't have them at home. But we had one hole, like, okay, they have the devices, now what? And we've developed and two, providing hotspots for everyone was, not going to be within financial reach. So we've created hotspots at the parking lots of our buildings, and because we are geographically a large district, we've also created them on government buildings in our outlying areas, so that every sector of our district they can go, they can download videos, upload assignments, all of that kind of stuff. And then as the icing on the cake, our the Berry Community Foundation, our local community foundation, unsolicited, gave us $6,000 yesterday toward defraying the cost of the Wi-Fi access. I'm done.
Thank you, Anna. That is clearly, you know, for all of you, or I shouldn't say all, most of you, kind of equity and access is an issue, and districts have really approached that in different and unique ways. And Ann mentioned virtual meetings and trying to learn things here. She talked about not doing a dry run ahead of time. I have talked to a lot of districts that have done dry runs, or they've done at least committee meetings prior to a board meeting. I do think it probably serves districts well if they have a little bit of that opportunity to try it before you're doing it live. So if you haven't had it yet and are planning on it and have time for practice, if you weren't, that would be something that we would recommend, is do a practice run before you do the real thing. And I would also add, I talked to a district yesterday that talked about their posting for an online meeting. And as much as you may still meet the legal requirements to post a meeting on your doors at your school and other things, with nobody going through that, it probably is not within the spirit of the law. So the recommendation probably is to at least post on your website, as you often do, post on Facebook if you have a Facebook page, so at least people are aware that you're having a meeting. I'm going to do one more, have Phil recognize one more person in this question, and then we're going to switch questions.
All right, Mr. John. Oh, I missed your last name. You had your hand up.
Yeah, John Matias from Grand Rapids Public Schools. Just we had our first virtual board meeting. It was interesting. We did do a dry run, which really allowed, we had about 8 public comments during that time. One of the kind of exciting things was that parents are recognizing the lack of parent know-how in terms of technology, and just the desire to have parents learn with their children. Their children typically have more knowledge of the internet and those kinds of things. And so we had a good collaboration of parents wanting or desiring to be able to do some online teaching to our parents to get up to speed with the internet use and so forth. The other thing too to comment on is that really our teachers unions have worked marvelously to get things off the ground. We probably have around 3,000 students that need the technology aspects of that, from hotspots to tablets and so forth. And so our union really hashed out all of those kinds of details, as you know, that need to happen. And so we have to give kudos in working with our unions and our teachers, eager to connect with their students, probably more so through this social distancing. So really appreciate our community and our teachers and our unions. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I'm going to have our moderators actually wipe out all the hand raises that are up there right now. And I'm going to go to a question that kind of falls along this lines. We know that a number of districts where you had the wherewithal, maybe you didn't have one-to-one, but you were able to allow families to pick up computers that didn't have them. Ann got into this question. Interested if any districts have taken kind of more innovative steps as it relates to the internet access question. I live in Grand Ledge, and even those on the edge of town where I am, DSL might be the best thing that they have, and others may not even have that. So any innovative things that you have done to provide internet access to your families that don't have that? And I see a couple of hands going up already, so I'd like to hear on those.
Ted Rothsberger.
Sorry, my name's Ted Roethlisberger, Mattawan Consolidated Schools. We're near Kalamazoo. People think that it's urban, more of an suburban area. we have large swaths of our district that don't have access to internet at all. And not even from an income perspective, there just isn't DSL, there isn't cable, there isn't anything anymore. So we have a motto, most people probably do, but ours is kids first, right? So although it costs quite a bit, I think it's going to cost us somewhere in the neighborhood of a little over $100,000. We provided 370 hotspots out to individual families in the district. It's not super innovative, but we also have a Wi-Fi bus that we're trying to get out to some of our other areas to create that mobile type hotspot where we might be able to roll things through on a schedule.
And Ted, I'll just ask while you're still unmuted. Did you have particularly work with a specific vendor in getting all of those hotspots, or did you just work through a local cellular company or something?
I'm not sure what vendor it was. While we're talking, I'll send an email to our tech department and ask and find that out. And I'll respond.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, Mr. Matthew Showalter.
Thank you, Phil. Matthew Showalter, Shepherd Public Schools. So we did kind of a combination. We've had hotspots that we've gotten through Verizon and are supplying to individuals that need them. And we've done something along the lines that Ann spoke about earlier. We've partnered with some local churches in our district, in our area, as well as businesses to install Wi-Fi hotspots where the kids, one's near a trailer park, 2 trailer parks that we have in our district, and as well as our school buildings where people can go download their assignments, homework, videos, return to their homes, do their work, and then return back and upload their assignments. So we've had a great response from businesses and churches that are throughout our district offering their facilities for us to install that stuff.
Thanks, Matt.
Done.
Mr. John Seaman.
Yeah, that's good. John Simeon, Grand Haven Area Public Schools. Something that we had done about a year ago or so that we started putting in access points around the city. And they're coming out from our in-city schools in there so that everybody had internet access in there. And it was only the devices that we gave them that were able to connect to those access points and so on. So we got ahead of the curve before we even knew we needed to get to it.
Thank you, John.
Mr. Chris Cole.
Hi, Fruitport, what we did, we bought some Chromebooks that have Verizon right on them. So we have about 10% of our district doesn't have internet access. So that was the best way to get it out to some of our rural areas.
Thank you.
Done.
Yeah, I think this access question is one that, a lot of districts deal with. And for those in a more populated area, I do think the hotspots are a way to go. Of course, we have some areas of the state where northern, lower, upper peninsula, where even cell service is a bit spotty, and it makes it more difficult for them. But I do think the hotspot implementation that you're talking about is an effective way to do that. I see Pam put up on the chat function about providers doing some reduced costs. Any other examples of that people want to share, where whether it be cellular companies, cable companies, or others, where they have worked with you as a school district to get either cheaper or lower cost access, at least through the end of the school year? I'm going to switch to another question then, and say, we've talked about the good things. We've talked about, I think, what you're doing in the internet access piece. We've talked a little bit about board meetings. I would be interested in what you maybe still see as a large challenge that you might be looking, that you might have an idea on solving, but you're still trying to figure out how to make something happen. And this might be a space where with this group of people on with you, they might be able to provide solutions. So, you know, challenges that you're still facing in delivery of education, in virtual meeting standpoint, working with your staff and trying to make things happen. What are some challenges that you're facing that we might be able to work on? I will also say before you can raise up your hands, Kathy Stewart just said appreciate MASB providing a resolution to recognize essential and recognize and honor essential workers. We actually are working on that right now. Probably within the next 24 hours, we'll have that up on our COVID page, and districts can grab that and pass a resolution if you are interested. And I just wanted to recognize that. But if anybody have hands up about challenges and how we might be able to help, or people on the screen might be able to help.
Tim Hall, would you like to share? Tim? No? No.
There we go. Better?
Yep.
Okay, thank you for your patience. This really isn't an immediate thing, but I've been on a couple of different calls with Senator Shirkey and the Senate Majority Leader, and we've talked to him. We also talked with Senator Schmidt, K-12 Appropriations Chair Committee Chair, on the need for the state making a significant commitment in increasing broadband access around the state, and however that looks, whether it's through better cell phone coverage or better infrastructure. And we've gotten, I'd say it's slightly warmer than tepid response, but I don't want to say that they're ignoring the thought, but I'm thinking that, you know, my association, the MASA, and certainly MASB, MASSP, all of the folks, we need to make this a push. We're learning that all of our districts are at various stages of being able to provide the best remote learning access that we can. Not all of that has to be online. We understand that. We are doing, like most districts around the state, a blended approach, primarily packets for our K-4 kids, and then doing the best we can for online stuff for the upper grade levels. But long term, you know, they're talking about the possible resurgence of this virus in the fall. We don't know what fall school is going to look like. We know there have been discussions around the state about whether or not all parents are going to even feel comfortable about sending their kids back to our buildings in the fall. So I think as an educational organization, all of us need to keep encouraging and actually even pressuring our state folks to make a commitment. And I know that the budget's going to be difficult right now, given where we're at. It's all bad news at this point, but we've got to make a commitment that we increase that level of broadband for our kids so that we can be better prepared and provide even better education in the future than we are now. That was my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. I think that's a challenge for a lot of rural districts, particularly on broadband access. I know that our national association and the AASA have been really pushing at the federal level for greater funds in that space. I mean, at this point, I do believe, knowing, as you said, that how tight our state budget will be and likely reductions in a number of areas, both in state government and schools, prioritizing money that we don't have into that space will be hard for them, although necessary. I think the push at the federal level becomes probably the right place to push. E-rate money that already flows into school districts. How can we make that a bigger pot of money to be able to do things, to get you to be able to bring providers in and do some of that work? But and you've also mentioned fall, and I've seen some of the questions coming up along the screen. And I had one emailed to me today. You know, we don't have any answers for the fall yet, as you can imagine. I don't think there's been any in-depth discussions with policymakers yet about what does the fall look like. Part of it is we have to know. I do think the parent concern is real. You know, we know that it could be as you could see something where we're going back and, it's school as normal, although we will encourage the legislature to waive the 75% attendance threshold so that we don't get penalized because some parents are making decisions. But, people are already talking about, well, maybe it's every other day in shifts of kids where they're learning from home one day and they're learning from school another. People have talked about split days, but of course there's a busing cost if you do half the kids in the first half of the day and half the kids in the second. It's just too early to tell. And I've talked to my other state counterparts. To my knowledge, there's not any states yet that have a clear answer on what the fall looks like. I think California, because of its size and the risks that they've seen in the early stages of this, are probably talking about it more than most, but they have no decisions yet. But just to know kind of where things are at from Lansing's perspective. But I know we have a few other hands up already on challenges. I'd like to hear from them.
Paul Cullen, would you like to share with us?
Yeah, thank you. So, I've heard some things actually in the chat box or what I've heard, in terms of the budget, anything.
We're not hearing you, Paul.
Oh, you can't. Should be. Does that help or?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I've been hearing some just chatter in terms of the budget, just high level, and I know you don't have any details, that it can go anywhere, that there's rumors that, even though the original executive order indicated that would be fine through the end of the year, that there may be changes in that. And then, potentially with, all the revenue being lost because of the pandemic, that, we're looking possibly at, $500 million that could be lost. And we're looking, a potential decrease, as districts, start to plan for next year. And we may be unique as we're going through contract negotiations. We just want to get from your perspective, what you've heard and what, from a high level best practice, we should start thinking about as districts across the state of Michigan in terms of budget.
Yeah, Paul, your audio was really poor during that. So I know that you were talking about the budget and the legislative process and possible cuts and what's that look like. I'll do my best to answer. I know Jen Smith is going to be better at it than I am. And I'm sure we'll have another webinar with her. I've been on webinars now with Shirky, Chris Kolb, the budget director, and others talking about the budget shortfall, and people seem to be in general agreement, and it's a wide range right now because it so much depends on going back, how quickly people go back in. The high end over this year and next year, and because of the way that schools' budgets don't align with the state, it creates a weird dynamic. But when we think about the state's budget, which is about halfway through, or a little bit more than 2/3 of the way through, plus the following year, they are saying upwards to $7 billion that their projections where they had been will be off. We do know that the federal government stepped in the school sector. We have about $390 million that will come into our state. One-time money that, likely, much like we dealt with in 2008-9 with Race to the Top. There is talk about the possibility of a proration in the current year. When the state looks at that, of course, they don't see the end of the year until September. We know that our expenses are generally taken care of from a school perspective. We're spending most of our money right now, and that's about to wrap up. Mike Shirky has said if they can stay away from any kind of proration of the foundation in the current year, they would like to. They've also talked about, do we do nothing to this year and push all of any shortfall into next budget year so that you finish the year and it gives you the summer to know and plan based on budget? No decisions have been made on that. Shirky did mention in one of his phone calls, something we've pushed back against the last couple of years is kind of a refinancing or an extension of retirement costs. But clearly in a time like we're dealing with now, our greater membership might say, whatever we need to do to not, be cut too much or, or minimize cuts. So we have, I think we have a road ahead of us to try to figure this out. Our first step is going to be to try to figure out getting through the current year. We'd be interested to hear from members on the question of avoid all cuts this year, and so that it all happens in one year so that you can finish this year and then prepare, or whether you want to try to take it out of both. I'm sure Jen will pose that question as she does other webinars. And, I don't know that we should say we expect more stimulus coming out of the federal government, but they have far more opportunity to do it in Michigan because we are required to do a balanced budget. And I would expect that budgets will run a little bit later this year, maybe beyond the July 1st date that was passed in law, just because of the unprecedented nature of what we're dealing with. But we are hearing from leadership in the House and Senate that those committees at least are having conversations on the side so that when they get here, they're not starting from scratch. So we're on it, but we just don't have a lot of good information now on that. I see you're answering. Just so you know, I did put up the poll for those to answer that question for us, so that we can know that. It looked like we still have a couple of participants with raised hands. Let's see if we can have them talk.
Hi, Janice. Do you want to give your name and what district you're from? Janice? Oh, hi.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges for our district, I'm Norway Balkan area schools, is how to do the counseling piece. Or, many of our kids, I think, are having some mental health issues with remote learning, etc. And most of our teachers are doing classroom meetings via Google Classroom. But still, I think that, the confidentiality, all of those issues. And I didn't know if any of your districts were doing anything that you'd recommend or hints.
I think that's a great question, and would create value, because I've heard that refrain through a lot of districts. For those districts, board members or superintendents, do you have ways that you're doing one-on-one counseling for students that are struggling through this? I would be interested to hear from you on that and help each other out. So we have some hands up, and I see some comments in our chat screen that people can look at for answers too.
Could I have Michelle Devine-Childs give her name and district you're from? Michelle Devine-Childs.
Hello?
Hi.
Yep.
Okay. Hi, Michelle Devine-Childs, Hale Area Schools, and probably my biggest concern, and something that I really am not seeing any real insight to, is while we have many of our students participating, I mean, we started March 16th with packets going home and instruction right from the get-go. But what I'm not seeing anything coming down from the state is, yeah, you can give credit, no credit. Some are giving grades, but there were comments made by state leaders that your kids will advance. And that, even though I know that's not technically true, that's what they're going for. And now, how are we going to deal with this mass of parents when you say, sorry, your kid didn't do the work and we're not advancing them? And then you have now bottleneck classes if that does happen, as far as class sizes. And I'm done.
I know Jen Smith is on the line or on this call with us, and she'll take down all of the comments that are legislative related. And that will be one. I know that the governor has tried to create maximum flexibility, and I think school districts have also, related to really kind of making kids first in this process and going to credit, no credit. I mean, that is a different situation than somebody either being unable to participate for some reason or not participating. And my initial indications, I think, are people are saying you would still move them forward, but I don't know that to be a fact. So we'll have to dig into that one a little bit more. I do like that a lot of chat people have put out what they're doing in districts related to kind of social work and counseling. I think that is helpful for those that are on there. I'm trying to honor the 1 hour, and I know that we're coming up within minutes of that. Let's go for one more answer. I'm thinking, yeah, we'll do a couple more on this topic. Oh, actually, I'm going to stop it. We're going to delete hands right now. I want to throw one other out there. It means we're going to go over a little bit, but I think this one's important. What have you as districts made any decisions at this point related to graduation? You've already scheduled them for August. You're going to wait until the beginning of the school year. You're going to try to still do them in June. But if you actually have made not just ideas, but if you have concrete plans on graduation, I think that may be worth sharing with folks just so that they can hear some ideas of what others are doing.
Howard, would you like to give your name and district?
Yes, Howard Parmentier, Manistee Area Schools. We currently have our graduation set for the end of May. What we are planning on doing is we are going to be moving forward with our graduation. I believe it's May 29th, with the understanding that depending on what is allowed, what restrictions have been lifted, we are also looking to do something later in the summer that may be more of a formal get-together. We're just waiting on rules and regulations to dictate. Done.
Thank you.
John, if you'd like to share again.
John Simeon, Grand Haven Area Public Schools. Actually, we've got our original date, May 21st, still in the books yet. We're waiting to see what Governor Whitmer says, can happen after next weekend. But then we also have in the books a date in June, a date in July, and then the Friday before Labor Day in there. So, just so we've got something set so we can work with it once we get the final okay. I'm done.
Thank you, John.
John Matthias again.
Yeah, hello everyone. Yeah, we in our board meeting discussed, right now we're still planning on, and again, depending on what we're allowed to do, we're wanting to see our seniors graduate. They've earned it. Right now we're going through the process of those that are on track and those that are off, and figuring out how we can manage that. For us, we're kind of taking a wait and see, because we do want, and again, depending on how many can gather, all those limitations that might be put on us, we do want to figure out some kind of celebration. We may have to be creative about what that looks like. Right now, we're planning on having something for our seniors. We'll have 4, typically about 8 graduations, but so we're trying to figure some of those things out. Thank you.
And we're at our time, and what I would encourage is anybody else that has kind of innovative or concrete plans or schedules, throw them in the chat function while I finish this up so people can take that as topics. I will say from the polling perspective, 97% said an opportunity to continue to come together as board members and share would be worthwhile. So we will look at trying to schedule these regularly through the end of the school year to pick up ideas and to learn from each other. And we will do that. Also in the chat function right now, knowing that you've answered the question in that, if you have any other topics that you think, and we will continue to do legislative topics, webinars, We will continue to do legal ones when things come up. But if you have other topics that you think would be useful from a webinar perspective, whether that be MASB staff or us finding an expert in an area that you think would be useful, throw those into the chat function. You can email me directly at MASB, dwatruba@masb.org, and of course you can get that off the website. Or if you even think of things that, in light of what's happened here, workshops that would be useful over the summer with your board, when we're back in a place where maybe we can do it in the district or we can do it virtually with your district, we would be interested in those topics that you think would be useful in the space. This is, as I started at the top of this, unprecedented in times, and we want to figure out not what, we don't want to deliver to you what we've always delivered. We want to deliver to you those things that you say, right now, this would be helpful for us as a board or a district. And so in the chat function, throw up as many things as possible that we can look at and see if we can offer that. So I want to thank all of you for being on today. Appreciate your time, appreciate your sharing. Clearly we didn't, based on the numbers, I think we'd like to hear from more. And we'll have to have some, it makes me want to have some conversations internally. Is there a way for us to do it electronically in a more message board format or something? If people can do it that way and share, we may or may not have the wherewithal to do that quickly, but at least it comes to my mind as we look at this. So thank you all very much. Stay safe. Keep leading as you are doing. MASB staff and myself appreciate what you're doing in your local districts. And please get a hold of me directly. And that is, either through my email address or you can call me directly, and I'm happy to try to answer questions or put things in place that will be helpful to all of you. So thank you all. Have a good afternoon, and hopefully spring will come to us sooner rather than later. Have a good day.